Hey everyone, welcome back to 996 Owl. What better time to make a Barrett Hayton video than when he's shut down for the next 6 to 8 weeks due to a minor injury in his wrist, whether provoked because they were able to acquire Riley Nash on waivers, or Barrett Hayton finally said, you know what, it's better if I get this surgery, so any way you can to help the center depth position, it's, Bill Armstrong, go out and get someone to replace me because, yeah, the center depth is not strong with the Coyotes, and if they lost Barrett Hayton earlier than getting Riley Nash, it would have been a bit of a murky situation. But Travis Boyd stepping up, Johan Larsson stepping up recently, so they could cover for Hayden, and they have Riley Nash in the bottom six, who's a veteran, responsible player who got a point in his first Coyotes game. He had 0 points for Tampa, 0 points for Winnipeg this season. First game in the desert, he gets a point. So, maybe they flip him in 6 weeks at the trade deadline. He was traded last trade deadline. Toronto, I believe, saw something out of him. They wanted a responsible centerman, but he was injured at the time and never got to play a game for the Maple Leafs. So maybe this time around, if he continues being responsible, two-way centerman with some good face-off numbers, maybe they could flip him, but I doubt it. Anyway, let's get back to this interesting draft. This draft where, outside the top four, kind of is pretty rough, except for Hughes as well, too, I would say. Maybe Blakefist. But obviously I didn't put, Darlene, who went first, Svechnikov, Kokoniemi, and Kachuk. They're all having really great careers. Maybe KK's the odd man out. We all know him from the Montreal Canadiens, who recently got traded to Carolina. He was offer sheeted, I believe, to Carolina, or just signed as a free agent to Carolina. I forget which one it was, but it was a whole drama thing, which actually then provoked the Canadians to go out and send a first and a second for Christian Dvorak. So a lot of things happening. I didn't put those players because Arizona couldn't do much, that those players were gone. So I just put players that were in Arizona Coyotes control at the time, under John Chayka's control. If he didn't go for Barrett Hayton, what else was there? And it could be a case of drafting for your need and not really drafting for the best player available. In the first draft Chaika had as GM, he got Clayton Keller and Jacob Chikrin. In his second draft, he got Pierre-Olivier Joseph, who was another defenseman. So already he drafted two defensemen. In the 2017 draft, he traded away the first-round pick for Derek Stepan and Antti Ranta to try to build up a competitive team and establish a core. With that first round pick they gave to New York, the Rangers picked Elias Anderson, who didn't really pan out, and I believe he's not even playing in the NHL anymore. So we get here to the 2018 draft, where obviously the Coyotes need a centerman. Their center position was their weakest at the time. All they had was Dvorak, Stepan, and Strome. Can't forget Dylan Strome. Dylan Strome, who was traded about a couple months later in November 2018 for Nick Schmaltz. Defensively, like I said, they already drafted Chikrin. They already drafted Joseph. They still had Ekman Larsson, who they just signed to a long contract. They still just acquired Goligoski. They had Hjalmarsson. They had Capobianco at the time. So their defense were all right. They didn't need a goalie because they just got Kemper, Ranta, and they still had Aiden Hill in the pipeline. Then you look at wingers. Do they need wingers? Well, they had Keller, Domi, Duclair, Krause as like their top wingers. So maybe you can make a case the wing position was weak as well, but their center position was just really bad. It was obvious. I mean, for countless years, almost a decade now, the Coyotes, the meme is they need a number one center. The only person who came close was Martin Hanzal, who they managed to trade for a first-round pick. Christian Dvorak was playing first-line center minutes, but he's way too defensively minded and is just suited for a two-way forward type player. He wasn't that number one centerman around the NHL. So we come to this draft. The center position is so weak in this draft, but they decide to go with Barrett Hayton, who hasn't really made an impact offensively and in terms of production in the NHL. 4 points in 20 games in his first season, 3 points in 14 games in the shortened season earlier in 2021. And then this season, 6 points in 26 games before getting surgery and being shut down. So after Hayden is a bunch of wingers, and this really was a great draft for defensemen. It was a really poor draft for centermen, like I said. The comparable to Hayden is obviously the person who got drafted right after him, because as Coyotes fans and NHL fans, after Kachuk got picked, it was everyone thought or assumed automatically the Coyotes would draft Zadina, a scoring winger with an NHL quality shot, just a pure sniper, which the Coyotes really didn't have. They had a lot of speedsters, playmakers, and dekers in Keller, Domi, and Duclair. So everyone thought, oh, Zadina fits pretty well. Zadina, just like Dylan Guenther, who's just a sharpshooter. That's what Zadina was. But the Coyotes go off the board and pick Barrett Hayton, who was ranked number 9 on North American skaters, not even counting European skaters. But the European skaters were kind of weak anyways. So, ranked number 9 in only North American skaters, getting drafted 5th. So Detroit obviously would pick Zadina, but Zadina himself, he's kind of having a bit of trouble. He had 15 points in 28 games, which is pretty good for his rookie season, and then fell off a bit in the shortened season, only getting 19 points in 49 games. And then this season, only 10 points in 34 games. If you go on Reddit or the Detroit Reddit, there's a lot of joking around that, or maybe not joking around, that Zadina is a bust. The Coyotes don't like to use that word yet with Barrett Hayton. We still think, he's young. It feels like deja vu with Strome, but, at least Barrett Hayton is first line center. I know this current Coyotes team is void of talent outside of Keller in terms of forwards. But, the fact that he's playing with Keller and Schmaltz at his first line center, that his faceoff percentage is 50% after playing 26 games. There's something there, not ready to give up just yet. Whereas with Strome, he was playing, third line. He was in the doghouse a lot under Tocchet. Hayton was also in the doghouse with Tocchet. Strome was really strong on the faceoffs. So maybe we're getting there with Hayton. It's hard to admit for us Coyote fans. But honestly, for us Coyotes fans, at least I hope, we don't see him as a future number one centerman for this team. There's prospects out there maybe that haven't even been picked yet. This recent draft, Bill Armstrong barely drafted centerman, which was a glaring point to make for me. But after looking at the list, there weren't any really strong centermen the Coyotes could draft after Guenther. Guenther was like the best player at the number 9 position, which is good. He didn't pull a Chaika and draft a centerman. He said, best player available. I got rid of Garland. Let me get, the best player here. And it's a sharpshooter in Guenther. So I strongly believe with 8 picks in the top 64 players in the 2022 draft, so this draft coming up, it's going to be heavy on the centerman. I strongly believe that. There's no way they go through this draft with a lack of centermen, because the Tucson Roadrunners have a lack of centermen and the Arizona Coyotes have a lack of centermen. So where are these centermen coming from? And it's so widely known around in the NHL, you draft your centermen and maybe your puck-moving defensemen, and then you acquire the wingers, you acquire goalies through free agency and trades, just like we did with Darcy Kemper. So it's a lot being said. Let's move on. Quinn Hughes, drafted by Vancouver. Defenseman, honestly, just putting up huge numbers of points. Astronomical points. 53 in 68 games in his rookie, 41 in 56, and this season 28 and 33. So it's like a steady increase of point per game, which you like to see from a top-end draft pick. You don't like to see this inconsistency and drop-off like in Zadina's case, or just not producing at all in Hayden's case. You'd like to see a step progression every season. Just like Boykfist in Chicago, first season 13-41, then 16-35, incremental, then for some reason traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and now he has 14 points in 23 games. So just incremental progression. That's what you want to see from young players that you drafted high. And if you look at Joseph, who the Coyotes drafted in 2017, he still hasn't put a stamp on the NHL with the Penguins, traded for Phil Kessel. He's still in the AHL for a very long time. He's producing somewhat in the AHL, but whenever he gets called up, he's not producing and he's not taking that step forward. So you like to see your top end picks just make an impact in the NHL right away and then get even better with each successive season. Or you just have flat out bizarre scenarios like the Rangers, who I literally just mentioned Elias Anderson, who was drafted by the Rangers in 2017, and then in 2018 had the same problem at number 9 with Kravtsov, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I'm probably not. But him and the Rangers beefed and have a feud, and now he's requesting a trade. He's only played the last shortened season, 4 points in 20 games played. So that's back-to-back first-round picks for the Rangers that went sour. Somehow, they're with Lafreniere and Kako and getting Panarin in free agency, it's all sort of come together. They have a good coach, good goaltending, some good defensemen. So it worked out, even though they had a couple, mishaps with Anderson and Kravtsov. And then number 10, another defenseman in Bouchard, drafted by Edmonton. It's taken him a bit of time to put a big stamp with the Oilers. Everyone talks about Nurse. They're sorely missing Clefbaum due to injury. But Bouchard, I really don't hear his name yet. He has 19 points in 34 games this season with the Oilers. Not sure if he plays first power play minutes with McDavid. I assume not, because his point totals might be higher. I'm sure Darnell Nurse get those duties. And they also have Duncan Keith. I'm not sure where he fits into that. Number 11, who I wanted. So Wahlstrom was a player I wanted. Obviously not a centerman. He's a winger. I don't even know why I wanted him. I just, thought, oh, Wahlstrom. I just want him. I don't know why. Maybe I saw a highlight and thought he was good. But the Islanders, lucked out with back-to-back picks at 11 and 12, picking a winger in Wahlstrom. 21 points in 44 games played in the shortened season, and then 15 points in 26 games played. Currently, 8 goals in 26 games. It's really good. He's outproducing Hayden by a mile. Just loving his game, just a good winger, solid guy. And then the Islanders, after drafting a winger, go for a defenseman right after in Dobson, who is putting up respectable numbers. He took a bit to get going. 7 and 34, 14 and 46, but now he's at 14 and 26 games played. So with the Islanders, they're struggling in that transition from older veterans to younger players, but they got the players. They got Wahlstrom, Dobson, and they have Matt Barzal, obviously. So you got to build around those players. You have to transition. They're having a poor season. They're just relying too much on veterans and not much on their younger players. But, these two players, they should, develop even more and get even better and propel the Islanders out of the basement in which they currently find themselves in. So when I talk about drafting for your need, there was no one else for the Coyotes. It was just Hayden. They wanted a centerman. They could only get a centerman because these are the rest of the centers in the first round, and none of these guys are producing at all. The most surprised I am with is with Veleno, who was drafted number 30 by Detroit. I always hear his name and see his name written down. I think he's doing well, but he only has 4 points in 20 games this season, and a bunch of these other players haven't really made the NHL yet, or if they have, their production is pretty abysmal. So they're playing in situations that they're not really comfortable in. So the Coyotes, they needed a centerman. There was no centerman at this position or even after. Should Chaika have drafted best player available, I believe he probably would have gone with Hughes because Bouchard, well, Zadina too. Zadina, Bouchard, and Zadina, Bouchard, Dobson, Hughes, Wallstrom, and Veleno were all ranked higher than Hayton in the scouting report that released just before the draft. So, even if they picked Zadina, he probably would have been in the same situation, to be honest. He's not even succeeding in Detroit, where Detroit's plays a more offensive tempo game consistently compared to the Coyotes. But if I was John Shaika, obviously Hughes, Boykvist, and Bouchard, maybe even Wallstrom would have been great picks. And imagine you had Hughes, Chikrin, OEL, Goligoski, and then like Jalmerson and Capobianco, and you had Demers. I keep saying Demers, but he was good. He was serviceable. If you kept him at the bottom pairing. So I mean, Hughes, Chikrin, and OEL. Maybe things turn out differently. Um, yeah, Hughes is probably the best one after the top four that were taken. But if they got Wallstrom, they ended up moving away from Strome, Duclair, Domi, anyways. So They should have gone for a winger too. Reading the tea leaves, maybe looking at the future ahead. If the Coyotes and John Shaika knew that the 2018 draft was void of centermen, you maybe shouldn't have went with centermen and maybe try again at the next draft. But obviously, it was obvious that Shaika was trying to build a competitive team. The year prior, he trades away a first-round pick for Ronta and Stepan. He's starting to make moves to compete with the Coyotes a bit too early, obviously, with hindsight. But, if you look at present day, Bill Armstrong saw the 2021 draft and didn't draft their centerman. He may have Mannix Landry in like the 5th round as a centerman, but at that point, you're just picking players and hoping for the best. But, he picked Gunther, Doan, Moser, and Fedotov, who are they're not centermen at all. Gunther is rotating center positions in his Western Hockey League team, but he was not classified as a centerman. He was classified as a winger. So the first 4 picks of the most recent draft, Bill Armstrong didn't draft a centerman. He knows that the Coyotes are void of centerman, but he waited. He said, you know what? There's no centerman here. I'll get him at the 2022 draft. So for Shaika, it obviously would have helped if he drafted best player available, went with Hughes, Boykvist, Bouchard, Wallstrom, or Dobson. I'm sure if he didn't pick Hayton, he would have went with Zadina. It's too much hindsight and too much fallacy to say he would have gotten Hughes. I believe it was a toss up between Hayton and Zadina, and Shaika was like, "I'm gonna get the centerman." But if he knew the center ice position was weak this draft, just somehow wait it out, grab a great player and develop him, and and then trade him for your centerman. I mean, look at Chicago. They drafted Boykvist and then traded him for the player they wanted. Even though it was a really bad trade, they developed a player. He had enough credit to warrant a big trade that they wanted, that they thought would propel the team. So, Hayton, 5th overall, probably didn't deserve to be there. These other players are making a huge impact in the NHL and producing exceptionally for their respective teams, whereas Hayden's still struggling. Maybe this wrist injury was nagging him for a long time. I tweeted Craig Morgan asking if this was a lingering injury or it was just, it happened recently in 1 or 2 games where he got slashed. But Craig said it was a lingering injury. He didn't say for how long. I didn't, pester him with questions. So it was a lingering injury. I can tell after this news came out that this makes sense because he was not shooting the puck at all recently. Like, he would refuse to shoot. So now this makes sense that he has a wrist injury. All I hope for is it gets fixed. They don't rush him back. If he wants to take the rest of the season off, just take the season off. Come back next camp, and then next season it's do or die. It's just like next season for Hayton is a 2018 season that Strome had. They started Strome in the top 6, and then in the end of November, they saw what he produced. He didn't produce much, traded him for Schmaltz, and moved on. So I believe Hayton is in that part of his career now with the Coyotes. He's going to start, obviously, next season, first-line centerman with whoever, with the best players the Coyotes have. Maybe it's Keller again, or maybe it's Gunther. And then they'll see at the end of November what he's doing. If he's not producing, they'll move on. It's getting a bit too long, and it's turning into a Strome situation all over again. But hopefully with this surgery and just time off, and with some better talent next season, hopefully it goes well for Hayton. But Zadina too is having a rough go of it. If the Coyotes went for Zadina, pretty sure would have the same problem Hayton is having. He's a sniper, he's a goal scorer, and he's not producing. And he's not even a centerman to help produce on the PK or the face-off. So at least Hayton's good on the PK. The Andre Tourigny, always throws him out there on the PK with Clayton Keller, and he's 50% on face-off. So even though he's not producing offensively, he's producing in other situations and helping the team out that way. Whereas with Strome, he wasn't good on face-offs and wasn't penalty killing to boot. So at least Hayton's doing something. If he's not going to turn into a top 6 producing offensively heavy centerman, maybe he turns into a Christian Dvorak, changes his game, and just becomes a defensive centerman who picks up points here and there and slots into that third line position. And then they draft and acquire top 6 centermen to fill in those gaps. That could be another avenue and direction the Coyotes go with Hayton. But it's getting to an uncomfortable point. And with his surgery, I felt it was a good time to reflect and see where everything fell to place with this draft. So that's it for me. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, spread the word. And as always, thank you for your support.